Okay. I don't know what happened. It still said the same source, but maybe I moved the mic or something. I don't know. But Tom, are you ready for the Gestalt IT Rundown today? I'm very excited. I am in the office for the first time in quite a bit here, the lovely Gestalt IT offices, braving the no traffic and the no people in the office. Actually, Stephen Foskett's in the office today. We're maintaining social distance. Everything is fine. Don't worry. But back on location here from the lovely Gestalt IT studios.
I'm in the same place I always am, just on a different wall.
This whole COVID thing has to just be terribly disappointing to you. Everybody's talking about working from home. You're like, guys, I've been doing this the whole time.
Yeah, this is my usual jam.
All right. Pardon for the audio setup there. If there was any noise on that, I do apologize. But we're going to get started with the main show right now. Tom, we're going to be talking about some IT news. So let's get it started in 3, 2, 1. Hello all and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of the week. I'm your host, Rich Straffolino. I'm an editor with Gestalt IT. Joining me from across this great land of ours is the one, the only, the networking nerd himself, Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Rich. It's a busy week, but I always have time to talk about some news.
Absolutely. There's keynotes abounding. There are virtual events virtualizing. All sorts of fun stuff. But so we appreciate your time spending it here with the rundown to get up to speed on the IT news of the week. Let's get it started with a little something we like to call news or not. This is where just too much news to cover. So we're going to boom, boom, rapid fire, get Tom's take to see if this is in fact news or not. First up here, news from Microsoft. They acknowledged several errors with printers caused by recent Windows 10 updates. Windows 10 versions 1903, 1909, and 2004 were causing previously attached printers to error out when printing, and a separate bug specific to version 1903 caused the computer's USB port to disappear from the printer port list. Uninstalling the updates seems to have solved the issues, and Microsoft says it's working to address the bugs. Tom, Microsoft somehow managing to break printers in Windows. News or not?
Not news. Drivers are hard. This has happened a lot. It's just, do what you can do, man.
Next up here, OpenAI, the Elon Musk founded AI theoretical research kind of company, launched its first commercial product, an API in beta. It's its first time they're really kind of get money from out of customers, and that can provide a general purpose text in, text out interface for English language tasks, capable of generating dialogues, summarizing a block of text, completing code based on function names, and even translating natural language into Unix commands. Developers can show the API a few examples to improve output, although it can work just kind of out of the box, if you will, and provide specific data sets for training, or just doing human labeling feedback can help improve results. The API is available to qualified customers and is free for the first 2 months. OpenAI also pledged to cut off API access for obviously harmful use cases such as harassment, spam, radicalization, and astroturfing. Tom, I always thought OpenAI was just going to license a bunch of stuff on the back end, but news are now launching an API.
Welcome to the party, Elon. You're about 3 years too late. Maybe this takes off. Maybe it doesn't. Depends on how much it costs, how useful it becomes. I don't see this being a game changer right now. But of course, I said that about his electric rocket company too.
Does it seem like this is like a you remember the Google 411 service where it turned out they were just using that to train their voice recognition algorithm? Is this them just getting like people to eventually pay them to help refine their AI text recognition?
I wouldn't bet against it.
Next up here, Amazon announced it's putting a 1-year moratorium on the use of its facial recognition service by police. Amazon said it's advocating for governments to introduce legislation about the ethical uses of facial recognition, and quote, "We hope this 1-year moratorium might give Congress enough time to implement appropriate rules." Amazon declined to say how many police departments use recognition and only lists the Washington County Sheriff's Office in Oregon as a recognition customer on the AWS website. This comes a week after IBM announced they're getting out of the facial recognition business entirely. Amazon obviously taking a step not nearly as drastic. Tom, news or not on recognition 1-year moratorium for police?
This isn't a step in the right direction. This is a stumble off to the side. You want to make people move things. You want to actually have stuff happen for real. you're going to need to do it for longer than a year. You need to put some teeth in this, Amazon. Jeff, I know you're listening. In between running newspaper and a large shipping firm and that little side project that runs the entire cloud infrastructure for the world. 3 years, 10 years if you don't get your act together. This is the thing. Make it hurt. Make it so uncomfortable for them that they have to make a decision. Remember the part of whole civil disobedience? Forget the civil part. You need to focus on the disobedience part. That's how you get people to sit up and pay attention.
And notably, not listed in this announcement, governments, other law enforcement, like it's specific to police. It's not law enforcement in general. So the FBI, the U.S. government, anyone can, city governments can still use this, just not specifically police. So to me, seems also, pretty token gesture, if you will. Next up here, more on the tech side, Google Cloud acquired Elastify last year, and now we're seeing those assets integrated into their services. Google is rolling out a new storage tier called Filestore High Scale, which offers scalable capacity and performance up to 16 gigabytes per second throughput and 480,000 IOPS. That's input outputs. I was trying to read the acronym and say the letters at the same time. With concurrent access for up to tens of thousands of users. Google offers this as a fully managed service and will provide integration into high-performance computing workload management scheduling systems. Some of the press release was saying that they were, we want to get some existing, on-prem storage users and move them over to the cloud. This really does seem like it's just for HPC customers. Tom, news or not?
Not really news. Google integrates one of their acquisitions into a service that, well, quite honestly, wait, is this in beta? If it's in beta, we'll have it around for a while. If it's an actually released product, I give it 2 more years before they kill it.
This is a real product, so enjoy it while it lasts. And Elastify did present at Tech Field Day 12, I want to say, back in 2016, 2017. Really interesting stuff that they're doing to do kind of this high-performance concurrent access modeling. So check out that presentation at Tech Field Day if you want a little bit more, techfieldday.com, if you want a little bit more information on how exactly this is working, some interesting stuff there. Smart team that they acquired there. Next up here, Turkish security researcher Yunus Kadirsi recently outlined a flaw in the universal plug-and-play network protocol called CallStranger. This allows a remote and unauthenticated user to interact with devices that are supposed to be accessible only inside local networks, potentially to orchestrate DDoS attacks. The attack exploits the protocol subscribe function, which is used to send and confirm notifications to other attached devices on the network when specific events happen. CallStranger sends subscription requests with a forged URL that receives the resulting callback and it uses that as the basis for a DDoS attack, the forged URL being the one they want to DDoS. Vulnerable devices include Windows 10, kind of a big service area, the Xbox One, routers from Asus, Huawei, D-Link, and Cisco, Samsung Smart TVs, and tons of other devices. Basically, the only requirement is they have to be connected to the internet. Kadirsi notified the Open Connectivity Foundation, who maintains the UPnP protocol, and they've updated the underlying specification, but said that vendors will need to implement their own patches. Obviously, companies like Microsoft, Cisco, all have an interest in doing this, but I imagine especially for a lot of consumer gear, even from big companies and stuff like that, these patches just may never be out there, especially once you get into some of these weirder OEMs that have affected devices. Tom, news or not?
News, because we found another vulnerability in a protocol that really is riddled with vulnerabilities, but it's big enough with a huge enough surface area that it could be a problem. We're probably just going to have to shut off UPnP for a lot of things, but a lot of people have been shutting it off for years because it doesn't really work the way we want it to. So go patch your stuff or shut it down if you can't.
Tom, I was expecting like listen to me, just turn off UPnP. It's never worth it. I was expecting that, Tom. So
I would honestly be shocked if people were really running it anyway. That's how broken UPnP is.
And finally here, speaking of things that aren't broken, Box announced detailed updates to its Relay workflow engine. If you're not familiar with this, Relay was launched in 2019 as a way to standardize content review and approval workflows by moving them out of email, where, according to Box, 80% of these kind of interactions take place, and closer to storage. The update now makes it easier to set up these kinds of workflows with pre-built templates for 24 lines of business like sales, marketing, HR, legal, and finance. Basically, anytime you just need to do some kind of content review, whether it be contracts, that kind of stuff, kind of be able to do that without kind of the pain of email. Box also integrated file request into Relay, which can now trigger an automated handoff between sending and receiving files securely from third parties and Box Relay workflows. They don't use the word no code, but this has a very no code-ish kind of feel to it. Tom, news or not?
This really isn't news. This is them trying to get in on the DocuSign people, but also, hey, we're going to get rid of email. Let me email you about that. I get that people use email for things it shouldn't be used for because that's the most prevalent tool on their laptop, and it's easy to just be like, hey, does this look good? Yes. Okay, we'll send it back and we'll approve it. I don't know how many people are going to be wanting to jump through hoops here, unless it's a legal department or someone who really wants to make sure that there's a chop on there that covers their butt.
Yeah, and it is interesting that this comes as Dropbox announced that they would be only using DocuSign, which they have acquired, for their stuff going forward. So, maybe kind of heading that off. Evidently, this was a requested feature due to COVID-19, remote work and stuff like that, making this kind of review even more necessary. So interesting stuff there. First up for our main discussion stories here, Tom, I wanted to jump in on Intel's new Tiger Lake mobile CPUs. They'll be the first to integrate the company's control flow enforcement technology. The specification for CET was first published in 2016 and looks to put in controls on silicon to prevent malware, or at least disrupt malware's operation. One feature to do this is called Shadow Stack, which stores a copy of an app's order of operations used in their code to a secure part of the CPU. This is then used to compare what's actually running on the system when that app is running to see if malware has impacted. That's kind of a common vector for malware there. The other is indirect branch tracking, which provides additional protections against apps using CPU jump tables to read memory locations outside of what is using. Kind of a pretty typical side channel attack there. Intel plans to include CET in all upcoming server and desktop chips as well. These mobile Tiger Lake chips just happen to be the first to get it. Intel has had no end of side channel attack exploits over the last few years. Does this help turn the tide here, Tom?
Remind me again how these chips are going to be able to run all this additional processing stuff with recreating shadow stacks and all these other things. And yet every time I ask you to patch Spectre and Meltdown, you claim that the world will fall down if you do because it's going to cost you so much CPU performance. I mean, I get it. These are hard things to solve because what we've basically been doing is we've been trying to drag race CPUs forever to have the biggest numbers or the best performance. And who cares if you could accidentally read, I don't know, the entire contents of registers and steal data from it? It's still really fast. No, this is closing the barn door after the horses have already gotten out. We know that Intel chips are super vulnerable to these kinds of attacks because of their very nature. We know that people are going to continue to exploit them going forward because who's going to completely rip and replace all the Intel CPUs in their organization when these are released and has all this stuff? Nobody, because these things have a shelf life. Guess what, guys? Too little, too late. Fix your problems. Don't give me features that patch them.
The interesting thing is that since they've been working on it since 2016, they've been working with Microsoft and major app vendors to kind of integrate these because I guess there does need to be some software optimization for some of this stuff to run. So I mean, good that it will be available on Windows Insider Builds are already putting this out. It'll be in the mainstream Windows releases kind of when these chips start to hit the mainstream. That's good, but also in 2016 shows that Intel obviously didn't know about Spectre and Meltdown, or they're never going to publicly admit to knowing anything like that, but that they knew that these kind of side channel security stuff were going to be an issue down the road and trying to head that off. Unfortunately, they couldn't get that out 2 years earlier to at least save a little bit of face. All right, next up here, really interesting story. We're using GitHub as kind of the frame to this, but we've been seeing this kind of across the industry. Tom, I definitely want to talk about it. GitHub CEO Nat Friedman announced that the code hosting service would be switching from using the word master to main to denote the main branch of a repository. The move comes as other projects have worked to remove terms from code libraries with either ties to slavery or racially loaded terms. The Android open source project, the Go programming language, Grammarly, the curl download utility are among a host of companies, organizations, and projects that have all changed things like whitelist and blacklist to allow list and block list. And LinkedIn developer Gabriel Casapo said on Twitter that he's working to update Microsoft's internal libraries to make similar changes. This isn't the first time we've seen something like this. In fact, the Drupal CMS project was one of the earlier adopters of kind of rethinking the language that they're using, having changed master and slave terminology with primary replica in 2014. Tom, obviously, this is kind of a reflection of what is going on in kind of the larger social scene here and kind of reevaluating how we are framing things that I think we take as far too common, or we just assume, oh, it's always been like this, so we always have to use this kind of language. I think it's really interesting, Tom, that one of the things that always comes up with the Tech Field Day community is, words matter, language matter, and I can think of nothing better than obviously the on-premises kind of distinction. That is very trivial, right? Ultimately, yeah. But people are super passionate about that because they make the argument that words matter, words can be confusing, be precise. And I would argue that things like master-slave, blacklist, whitelist, especially if you're coming at that from an ESL background, which a ton of people in IT are doing, coming from a US-centric perspective, those are not descriptive terms. Those are terms that have an implied meaning that you kind of have to have explained. I think outside of any social connotations, which I applaud all of these projects for moving forward on this, especially Drupal. I didn't realize that they had kind of moved to change that terminology. That there is also a technical benefit to that, which I think isn't being talked about. Obviously, the primary importance of this is kind of on rethinking how we are framing these types of terms. But Tom, I'm interested in your thoughts on this.
This is something that we've had for a long time that I've never felt 100% comfortable with. And I used to do this for a living working for Gateway Computers. And I would have to have people go into the BIOS, and I would have to have them check on their IDE drives. One of them is the master, one of them is the slave. That made me uncomfortable in 2003, to be quite honest with you. And it doesn't even describe the right operation of that drive. It's not like the drive it's the second on the IDE chain is completely subservient to the drive that's the one that's in the primary position. They're just chained together. So it's not even that you're using the term correctly. I mean, there could be an argument made for whitelist and blacklist, but again, you're not describing what those lists do. You're just putting colors on them. It could be red list and blue list. It could be purple list and pink list. The problem is that so much terminology that we use in English is loaded, and not just existing terminology. There's a lot of terminology that's being transformed on a daily basis to carry more loaded, meaning behind it in ways that we couldn't possibly begin to imagine. And so I will admit, yes, I have used those terms before: master, slave, whitelist, blacklist. I'm sorry. I should be better. We should all be better. Find a better way to use that terminology. Primary, secondary, publisher, subscriber, allow list, block list. Be specific and be aware of what you're saying. I mean, I'll just say it. We would never call it cracker list. Do you know why? Because that's a horrible thing to call it. Don't do that. Be aware of what you're doing. Yeah, it may sound funny. Yeah, it may make people in the office chuckle. But if you're afraid to show it to somebody, you're doing the wrong thing. All right? Let's be better people. Let's be more aware people. Look at what you're doing. And I applaud everybody who's doing this. But we all need to go through this. And I'll be honest with you guys. If you're doing it and you're grumbling about it, I can't believe I have to change all the references to whitelist. You're not any better than if you were using it in the first place.
Yeah, and I mean, just from my interactions with the community, I expect everyone that has a passion for on-premises, and I'm not using that as a joke. If you are passionate about that, you should be passionate about this, because words matter. The language we use matters, and it may not impact you, but that doesn't mean it doesn't impact someone, or Again, this goes into a larger conversation that this show is not the medium to necessarily have, but certainly not. But it's about making IT a place that welcomes everybody, and if we can make our language better and make IT better as a result, both on a technical level, on a cultural level, I applaud these, like I said, like you said, Tom, I applaud all these projects for doing this. We all need to be doing that, and we all need to be doing better. Absolutely. Yeah. Other people that need to be doing better, T-Mobile, they had a major voice and data service outage. Didn't mean to make that transition, but I made it anyway. In the US on Monday from 12 p.m. Eastern time to 1 a.m. So a 13-hour outage, widespread enough that other online services were being reported as down because people couldn't connect. I saw a bunch of panicked people saying that the US was being DDoSed. by nefarious organization X, whatever. At the time, Cloudflare CEO Matthew Prince attributed the outage to changes to their network configurations that created, quote, a cascade of failures across voice and data networks. T-Mobile CEO Mike Sievert said the event was triggered by a leased fiber circuit failure from a third-party provider in the Southeast, aka don't blame us. T-Mobile's network redundancies didn't seemingly do anything, resulting in an IP traffic storm that spread from the Southeast to create significant capacity issues across the IP multimedia subsystem core network that supports voice over LTE calls. Tom, were you impacted by this? In a 13-hour outage, I don't seem to recall any other operator. And doesn't this make you feel great that we have less competition in the U.S. marketplace?
Yeah, I know, right? Thank you, Ajit Pai, for making this a sunny, wonderful place for competition. Sorry, I had to get my dig in there. Okay, I wasn't impacted directly. In fact, I didn't even know what was going on. I heard some rumblings that T-Mobile is having some outage things. And then, of course, everybody passed around the whole, United States is under massive DDoS attack. Here's the thing. First of all, when Cloudflare has to tell you you've got a problem and what we think it is, and they're right, quit it. You're obviously not helping. Second of all, I read the blog post where the T-Mobile guys owned up to it. Yeah, it was a leased fiber line that caused a problem. Okay, great. The genesis of your problems was not your fault. Everything that happened after that for the next 12 hours was. You didn't test your redundancies. You didn't test your failover. And here's basically what happened in a nutshell for you non-networking people over there. They had two lines. One of them went down and everything failed over to the other one. Well, then it failed and it failed to the next one. And it was a cascade failure all the way through the network that just slowly started taking everything out, because it turns out that when you run two lines and you have load balanced 50% of the traffic that you have running across them, across both of those circuits, but the circuits aren't rated to hold 100% of the traffic in the event of a failover, you don't have a failover problem. You have a bigger problem. Because if all of your traffic fails to one of those circuits and then it goes down because it can't handle the load, you're not redundant. You're playing a shell game, and you need to stop. And all of you people out there that run service providers or content providers of any kind, I got bad news for you. You have to plan appropriately. We are notorious in the networking community for saying, when I say buy one, I meant buy two. When I meant buy this much capacity, what I really meant was buy twice as much, because you need to fail over in the event that one of those things goes down. And this is a common problem. Buy as much as you need right now, cross your fingers that nothing like this ever happens, and then eventually we'll get more money to buy just enough to handle what we're already running anyway.
This is the step 2 or step 3 is profit after that.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, I just based on what we know, this seems to be just this seems to be fundamentally, like you were saying, an underinvestment in infrastructure rather than, perhaps poor, I don't want to say poor configuration, but poor architecture in general, like more on a principled level. It just seems to be underinvested.
Yeah. Well, here's the terminology you can use for people who are not up into networking. This is replacing one of the tires on your car when it goes bald, instead of replacing multiple of them so they all fail together at the same time, and hoping that next tire that's going bald will get you down the road just a little bit longer until you're forced to replace it. Well, here's what happened to T-Mobile. One tire blew out, which caused the next tire to blow out, and pretty soon you don't have enough spares to fix yourself. Unfortunately, you can't hire a network tow truck to get you to the next location, and they got caught with their pants down. So hopefully John Laguerre gets off Twitter for about 5 minutes, goes in, yells at some people, and fixes this problem. I don't know.
He's out the door. He's out the door. He does not care. He's gone. It's all.
Show up again, dude. Somebody take half of their marketing budget and invest it in the network. The thing you're marketing.
Yeah, it's not a great look, especially again, considering the recent merger and everything like that, which seems to me like we're being promised that it's going to help with 5G build out, but maybe they need to also maybe do some reinvestment on the 4G side as well. We're running a little long here, Tom, so I just really wanted to really quick just mention, we heard from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman that Apple is set to announce the transition to ARM for Macs at WWDC on June 22nd. This is not their first rodeo. They've done it twice before, from Motorola to PowerPC to Intel. That was back in 2005. Just real quick, are you expecting to see a fundamentally different strategy from them in terms of kind of mirroring how they made the shift from PowerPC to Intel, or do you have any kind of thoughts on how that's going to be managed?
So the short version is I absolutely expect to see some form of an ARM-based Mac architecture coming. I would expect maybe within 2 years we're going to see that transition. If you look at the handwriting on the wall, which by the way is 18-foot tall capital letters, Apple's telling you exactly what they're going to do. All of the unification of running iPad apps on a Mac, that's all about ARM. We've known that for a year. All we're waiting for is the hardware to ship. I would expect that there's going to be a transition period. I'm going to expect that that WWDC is going to be all about enabling developers to start creating copies of their apps that can run on both platforms. I expect Intel to crap their pants because that is their largest portion of their revenue right now. But there's a great article at Stratechery that Ben wrote about basically how we got to where we are. And the short answer is Intel did this to themselves. They beat that cash cow. Yeah, they milked that cash cow one time too many, and here's where we are. And Apple said, you know what? Forget it. They bought Intel's modem business because they're tired of relying on other people. They're tired of relying on Intel to do things that aren't happening. You know what? We'll just do it ourselves. The problem is when other people do it themselves and screw up, they can come crawling back. Apple's never going to come crawling back. Intel lost this. So I would expect by 2022, all brand new Macs will be running ARM-based chipsets. We'll have unified applications running across the entire set. The lines will be significantly blurred, and Intel is going to be in the crapper.
Do you predict we'll see a ARM Mac release end of 2020?
No, 2021 at the earliest. They need to ramp the architecture, but we will hear about it. So WWDC 2020. Get ready for ARM. WWDC 21, here's the Mac you've been writing apps for the last 12 months.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And finally here, wanted to talk real quick. I didn't change the lower third. That's okay. Cisco announced that its SecureX security platform will be generally available on June 30th. Cisco first detailed SecureX back in March and positions it as a way to unify security visibility from Cisco and third-party devices, analyzing data across things like endpoints, cloud, network, and applications. It certainly doesn't lack for ambition. SecureX is now integrated across the company's entire security portfolio, and it just kind of, it comes, hey, you turn it on, pay the license fee, you got SecureX. The company is also announcing that it's integrated its SD-WAN by Viptela into Cisco Umbrella to effectively block malicious destinations before making a network connection. DNA Center is getting endpoint identification at scale to support with support for logical groupings of endpoints based on analytics, as well as the ability to analyze traffic flows between groups of endpoints to help design segmentation policies. Certainly, Cisco, in some ways, following a lot of trends here. But this is Cisco having it integrated. Basically, if you have some Cisco installed, you have SecureX potentially available to you. How big is this, I guess, for the overall security market, Tom? And do you see anything, I guess, kind of missing from this initial general availability?
So this is the completion of the drive to get away from selling boxes and selling software. That's all. This is SecureX integrating all their software pieces together, which honestly is something that's needed to happen for years. I don't necessarily know there's anything missing right now, but I don't really know that there's anything that should be happening either, just because it's an unknown unknown. I don't know what I don't know. And I'm waiting to see where Cisco takes this. Obviously, we're still 2 weeks from GA, and I'm sure we're going to see a flurry of patches within the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. We're actually going to be talking to the SecureX team tomorrow at the Tech Field Day virtual Cisco Live experience. So if you want to head over to techfieldday.com, check out the schedule. Ben Greenbaum, who's been doing an amazing job with this and who has the most epic beard at Cisco, will be presenting. And we're going to hear a little bit more about this. And I'm fully expecting some of our delegates to ask some of those big questions. But this is something that Cisco needs to compete with the Palo Altos of the world, with the VMware NSXs of the world. I welcome it, and buckle up because it's going to get fun.
Yeah, the timing of this, it doesn't feel like Cisco is late in this regard. I mean, certainly, security ain't going anywhere in the enterprise, and Cisco certainly has the market share too at any point if this was risk. But this feels like the right time where technologies like microsegmentation, their SD-WAN portfolio is extremely mature. I would say it is pretty mature at this point. I don't know, extremely mature seems seems too much. But they're kind of combining these technologies that maybe 3-4 years ago might have been seen as emerging or more experimental and more on the cutting edge. They've made some kind of smart acquisitions to bring the right stuff into the fold, and releasing this out there. I mean, I guess if you're a Palo Alto, if you're one of the I don't even want to call Palo Alto a smaller security company, but if you are not Cisco and you do network security, how worried are you about all of a sudden having a very easy sales pitch from Cisco here?
I'm not worried at all, honestly, because there's a lot of other factors that go into this, and that licensing cost is going to be a huge aspect to it. But this also means you need to get your house in order right now. You have a little bit of time. Figure this out, because you're going to be fighting a war on a front you really might not be capable of doing.
The one piece I haven't seen in some of the initial announcements, and I'm sure it's out there, but is in terms of integrations. I know a lot of the security ecosystem is all tied into the logging ecosystem, which is all tied into event management, which is all tied to APM and stuff like that. So there's a lot of security. I think we're realizing the nuance in that, and I think this is a reflection of that. It's very hard to just be a security company that's not concerned about security. It's hard to be a security company that's not concerned about application performance. All of these kind of exist in this convoluted ecosystem. I'm curious in what kind of integrations at launch that there will be for this, so that you can feed in your Splunk feed or something like that, to kind of augment existing solutions that a lot of companies have.
Yeah, I'm just wait and see approach. Cisco's already had a good security story, but I want to see what this chapter brings.
Yep. So check it out, techfieldday.com tomorrow, Tom, and looking forward to that. Bring your questions. You can watch the lecture. That just about does it for this episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Tom, thank you so much. Went a little bit long. Appreciate your time. Where can people find more of your great stuff if they are so inclined?
Honestly, just head over to gestaltit.com. I've been writing a lot of articles recently, especially some of our recent events. Also, if you want to check out some of the stuff that I do for my day job, techfieldday.com. Starting tomorrow, we're going to have some Cisco Live presentations. We've also got some more great stuff coming up as well. Just stay tuned. Check out the list of events. You're not going to want to miss anything that we're talking about. Absolutely.
And make sure you also subscribe to the Gestalt IT YouTube channel if they're watching it here or watching on Facebook later. YouTube.com/Gestalt IT video. We have all sorts of great video series that we're putting up, several ones a week now. So check those out, including Checksum, out every Monday. Until the next time we meet, for Tom, for myself, for all of us here at the Gestalt IT family, here's wishing you and yours to have a super sparkly day.